I have been reading, it's a book I'm reading called Black Fatigue. And I started it over winter break by Mary Frances Winters. So we'll list the book title and author in the box below, and we'll also put it on our Facebook page. But it speaks to not only one's individual fatigue with the experiences that add up in your life being a Black person, but it also speaks to how it gets passed from generation to generation, that weight and the cumulative effect that it has on you. And so it is something that is real. It is something that is exhausting. And I'm not I I'm not quite sure how to go about resolving it. And so we'll talk about it. But it yes, it is exhausting. It is exhausting. Mhm.
I know when I've asked you often how you are over the last few months, often what you say to me is exhausted. And I
Mhm.
understand you have two children and a family and a full time job, but you also are carrying the
Mhm.
weight of what's happening to Black people across the nation and to some extent across the world, but certainly across
Mhm.
the United States.
Yeah.
So,
It's an old tired, if that makes sense. It's like, okay, this happened in 1865 tired. It was Jim Crow, we're still at this tired. It was Civil Rights March, we're still here. It was the Voting Rights Act. It was Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. It is like all of these instances where it seems like the exact same fatigue sets in because it's still the exact same injustices that you are fighting. With it feels very little progress has been made to move forward. And so that over
mhm,
time
mhm,
is a very depleting feeling. And it's something you're defenseless against because I can't protect my kids from it, can't protect myself or my
mhm.
husband from it because these are the lives that we live. And so, yes, that has been my answer. Like, how are you doing? And just exhausted, exhausted. Mhm.
And I would say that there are some white people that are just beginning to grasp that, but there are many that are completely clueless about that.
Yes.
On that same topic, I haven't read that book that you're describing, but I was so fascinated with and still am the Resma Menakem book.
Yes.
He's a Black writer that wrote My
Hmm.
Grandmother's Hands. And he also talks about the generational effect, that it
Hmm.
actually trauma changes DNA, which,
Yes.
when you think about how species change over the millennia, that isn't a real surprising thought, that it actually
Hmm.
changes in response to trauma. And so, repeated trauma to large numbers of a class of people, a race of people,
Hmm.
is going to result in permanent changes of some sort.
Hmm. You know, I'm in graduate school working on my third degree. But one prayer that I say, and just about every Black student that I know who has done any graduate work always says the first day of the semester is, please don't let me be the only Black person in the classroom, because that
Mm-hmm.
bears a weight on you to not only be the voice, but you are the only representation of someone looking at something different. And so
Mm-hmm.
often when you speak to what your experiences are or how you have perceived something, then that is questioned, if not blatantly dismissed or invalidating. So it is exhausting to be in spaces that are dominated by the white culture and there is no counterbalance to it. And graduate, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
graduate school is an exhausting experience. And corporate America often leans towards that as well. And so you have to psych yourself up to be in these places and these spaces for whatever amount of time you need to be there in order to do what needs to be done. But that chips and erodes at you as time passes and as you get older and the further you get in your career, that continues to chip at you and continues to erode at your stamina and your resilience and everything that you would bring to the table. So That's what I mean by exhausting. There's no, I can't see of a way to escape it, at least right
Mhm.
now. Having to
Mhm.
explain your existence, your mere presence, everywhere that you go is what it is like. If you live in a nice home,
Mhm.
are you sure this is your neighborhood? If you drive a nice car, if you have an education, having to explain your existence every single place that you go. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I hear you. And I
Hmm.
think that's another area of Black experience that by and large, white people have been ignorant about.
Right.
Um, like
Hmm.
many. And unless unless a white person is close to a Black person through friendship or
Right.
marriage and has conversations about this on a regular basis,
Hmm.
I can see that it would be a cultural, I don't understand
Right.
that. Why is that going on? So, another good reason for these
Hmm.
conversations to try to, well, I can tell you something, Bernadette, that just by virtue of developing our friendship and deliberately reaching across these lines, not just about gardens and kids, but
Hmm.
actually about experiences,
Hmm.
that I have become more sensitized.
Yeah.
And I know when, if we're together, I know when things will hit you kind of hard. And
Hmm.
that's just from talking back and forth.
Right.
And that can happen on any topic, but we are particularly dealing with the black and white
Yeah.
racial issues.
Yes.
So, hmm,
And so that's the importance of having
I
these
don't know.
conversations and building relationships with each other so you can, it widens your lens when you build relationships with people who
Yes,
do
it
not look
does.
like you. Yeah. Hmm.
Right, right. I don't mean this to be superficial, but Stan and I
Hmm.
enjoy watching movies. And for several years, we have watched movies made by other cultures in other cultures, in other
Ah.
countries. And I just
Hmm.
find them fascinating. If they're not American movies made about Greece, but rather they're Greek movies or they are Italian movies
Hmm.
made by the people within the culture, and
Right.
you just learn so much, like, oh,
Mhm.
that's really different from the way our day-to-day life is, and you get a feel for it. And I have taken that the last year or two and deliberately dived into movies about the Black experience, but
Mhm.
particularly movies that are created by Black directors and Black
Mhm.
producers,
Mhm.
to where I'm sure that Black producer might have had a different experience than yours in your life, but it's still going to have some common elements, just like
Yes.
movies made about different cultures. And I
Mhm.
enjoy that. It's not always comfortable, but it's always expanding. It helps
Yes.
me expand my mind to dive
Mhm.
into things. Same with books.
Mhm.
To, it's not that I don't read white authors about racial issues, but to read from the Black perspective is really
Mhm.
remarkable and enlightening. And actually, from my perspective, it makes life so much more interesting. Like, oh, there is so much more of life that I didn't know. And so
Yes.
there's a curiosity and an opening up that I hope makes me a better person.
Yes.
But even if I can't fix these things, I can understand them better. And that's been
Mhm.
healthy for me. And our conversations are a piece of that, but they're not the only piece. I'm taking in a lot of other information too.
Yes. It's
So,
making yourself aware. And for those of you that are watching, a good movie to watch, and I recommended to you the other day, it's called American Skin, directed by Nate, I want to say Nat Turner, and the producer is Spike Lee. And so it is a movie. It was an experience. My husband and I watched it this past weekend, and I still have bits of that in my head. We're going to sit down and watch it with the kids. They're not really little with our kids this weekend and talk through it
mhm,
because it was just, the experience is totally different. That, the synopsis is a dad who served as a Marine, did active duty, came home, and simple traffic stop, the police murdered his son, and the chain of dominoes that it set off after that, and just the dichotomy of putting your life on the line as a Black man in active duty for this nation than to come home and watch law enforcement murder your son, literally for no reason, and there is zero
Mhm.
consequence, is a lot to chew. And so you'll see it's a lot. So I recommend that you and Stan watch it. I recommend all of our viewers to watch it because there's scenes in there when they're in the police department where truth of the matter really comes out and a different revelation is shown. So excellent, excellent movie.
All right. All
Hmm.
right. I will take that to heart.
Yeah.
Thank you for that recommendation.
Hmm.
So there's a lot to be learned. I mean, where people used to sit around fires and tell stories in their small tribe, our stories are now our movies, and choosing them wisely,
Yeah.
choosing from quality directors and actors
Hmm.
is important for our understanding. I guess
Yeah.
that would be the way to put it.
Hmm.
Is there anything else you want to say about this, Bernadette?
Um,
You could
it
hold
is.
that book up for one
I
thing.
would say, yeah, because I'm not even all the way through it. And she even brings up parts of Black fatigue and that parts that were on us that I hadn't even thought about yet. But on a subconscious level, you'll be like, no, you're totally right about that. That is true. And so I said, yeah. And so it talks about the unrelenting causes and effects of Black fatigue. So it is something to look, and it's a very easy read. She's a comfortable writer. And so it's not something that's uncomfortable to read. So I look forward to finishing it. But it is something that I suggest, if you have a good Black friend, to sit down and honestly let them share with you the toll that it takes just to live regular everyday life in the exact same country that you do. And you will be
Mhm,
surprised. You will be surprised.
mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
Surprised and hopefully humbled and inspired to speak up in spaces where you can see that they are being targeted. So it's not just us speaking up in certain spaces. We need other white people to speak up in
Right.
those exact same spaces to say that was a disparity. That's not how this should go. Or why would you ask that question? We have to have white people having this conversation and questioning each other on their intentions in order for things to change.
Yes, I completely agree. I don't
Hmm.
remember where it came up, but as I've looked at charts that show when women got the vote, and when people without land got the vote, and when Black people got the vote, and
Hmm.
when Black women got the vote, and so forth,
Hmm.
it's, as someone said, it's not justice, but women didn't get the vote, although they paraded for it. But truly, in this country, men had to give
Hmm.
women the vote. And then men and
Yes.
women of the white race had to give Black people the vote
Yes.
in a majority,
Yes.
and so on.
Hmm.
And it's kind of an appalling system. But unless we take a bunch of us and go off and create another world, another country, this is
Hmm.
what we got. So we have
Right.
to impress upon the people who have the power, who have the privilege, the necessity
Hmm.
of treating all with equality. And maybe that's what our conversations are aiming
Yeah.
for, is to
Hmm.
bring into understanding a higher number of people who do have privilege. And also perhaps it
Hmm.
helps you to feel heard, because I do hear you. I sometimes suffer from, I
Yes.
can't
Yeah.
fix it though. And it's true. I can't fix it, but I can do my part, and I have to live with that, you know. So
Right. Mhm.
so all right. Well, go
And
ahead
I
and
thank you for
you
I
can.
thank you for doing your part. Yep. Absolutely. If you have enjoyed this video, we ask that you like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, share and start these conversations in your life so that we can all be bigger influences on each other. So, as we say, start talking and keep talking, and we'll see you next week.